Shulchan Aruch Harav 272-3, subsection 3, 272 Siman. Mekachin al yain shebefi chavis afal pishiyesh by kimchin. You can make kiddush on the wine that's on the mouth of the barrel, meaning on the very top, tippy top. Even though it has like starchiness, like little pieces of starch, sort of. Which I've never seen such a barrel, so I don't know exactly what these little pieces of starch look like. But however, he first has to strain it to remove the starchiness things. If he's able to, but still, if it has like a white, like a membrane, like like a little, how when milk gets starts to what do you call it? The top gets like a membrane sort of thing, like something like that. So if it gets on it a white membrane, in mekachin, then you cannot make kiddush on it. Because probably it already got messed up the taste, and it has become vinegar. And wine that tastes like vinegar, even though it smells like wine, right? If you remember before, we said even if it tastes like wine and smells like wine, but has a bad smell. So in this case, if it smells like wine, but it tastes like vinegar in mekachin, you can't make kiddush on it. It's already lost its bracha of hagafen. Vinegar is not hagafen. The mention is
opposed to what we said before, which was in the opposite way. If it just smells bad, but it still tastes good, you can still say hagafen.
And even the bad smell is not vinegary. Even it's not a vinegary bad smell. It's just
a little bit something, a little off.
Yeah, it's like something that's not, because it's from the vessel, so it's not even related to vinegar. Which in that case you do make ber pi hagafen on it, and it's for every other way. It's wine, but you just don't make kiddush on it. However, if it tastes like vinegar, then you can't even make a hagafen on it, and let alone to make kiddush on it. However, if it is known for sure that its taste is wine, even though its smell is vinegar, then you do make the ber pi hagafen, and then you make you can make kiddush on it, because it all goes after the taste. Interestingly, even though it all goes after the taste, no, it doesn't. It actually, unless it smells bad. So this is how we know that when it's talking before about it smelling bad, it doesn't mean vinegary. If it smells vinegary, as long as it tastes like wine and not vinegar, that's okay. But if it tastes, if it smells funky, nicht vinegary funky, then even though you do make ber pi hagafen, it's just not something that you make kiddush on. It's not something nice to make kiddush on. And at the how do you say? Needless to say, the best way of doing the mitzvah is to choose a good wine to make kiddush on it, and not even to just take stam wine that's found around in the cellar, because without
just because it's in a wine cellar doesn't mean it didn't turn to vinegar.
Obviously, you can pour some in a cup and find out, but meaning don't take.
That's what he's saying.
Don't just grab a jug and start pouring kiddush from it.
Just because it's in a wine cellar doesn't mean it's good.
Maybe it will smell like vinegar, right? Even though he said that's fine if it smells like vinegar, but it's not the best way to do it. The best way is first take it, make sure it tastes like wine, make sure it smells like wine.
What do you mean? We didn't say it's fine if it smells like vinegar. Wait.
Yeah.
So it's not fine.
No, he said it's fine, but it's not the best way.
In the previous halacha?
If it tastes like vinegar, it's a problem. If it
smells like vinegar, also you're not supposed to.
It's not a problem, and you even make a hagafen on it. The problem is if it smells funky, not vinegar funky, but funky. Like it has a bad smell that's not a vinegar smell. That's like That's it. Just
Where did we see that?
unpleasant. Yeah.
I didn't see that difference.
The previous paragraph. This is different than what we spoke about in
it tastes like.
What?
When it tastes, hold on.
No. If it tastes like wine,
right?
Then smells like vinegar, no problem. If it tastes like vinegar, you got a problem. No, it's not a guffin.
I see. Sorry, I missed it. Yeah, okay, I see.
So there's three different.
The flavor is the determining factor, right?
There's three different categories here. Category one is it tastes like vinegar but smells fine. Too bad. The taste is the main thing. You cannot make kiddush on it. You cannot even make a guffin on it. The second one is if you have it smells like vinegar, but tastes like wine. You can make a hagafen on it, and you can make kiddush on it, but better not to.
It's not ideal. Yeah,
it's not ideal. It's not you should pick something that's
third
good. The third category is it doesn't taste like vinegar. It doesn't even smell like vinegar. It just smells ich. It is a funky thing that has nothing to do with it souring. It's not. In other words, it's off, but it's not because it's soured at all. It's because the example he brought was it sat in a vessel that Chveis had was it sat in a vessel that old socks had been sitting in before, something like that, and now it smells like old socks, but it doesn't smell like vinegar and it doesn't taste like vinegar, and it's completely hagafen. But that you wouldn't make, so that's even worse. If it smells like vinegar and tastes like wine, you're actually fine to make kiddush on it. If it smells like funky socks, you should not make kiddush on it because it's not respectful. It's like this is not what you make kiddush on. It smells like funky socks. The Abisha doesn't need your funky socks. So, however, even the one that tastes like wine and smells like vinegar that you're allowed to make kiddush on, it's the best thing is not to drink that, but rather when you have nowadays obviously you're generally going to buy. You can rely on the fact that there's some kosher distributors, I don't know, without naming no names because it's lashon hara and all kinds of other things, but there's places you don't know. You buy wine for them. It's good. It's not good. It's but in your regular average wine place, right? When you go to in Crown Heights, you go to the wine store.
Yeah.
You go to the wine store or whatever, all these regular wine stores, generally speaking, their wine has been kept first by the not the brewery, not the distillery, what is it called? The winery, in a proper condition, and generally it's been transported in a decent condition, and you can assume it's going to be it's a good wine. In those days, they had them in jugs sitting in the cellar. You didn't know really, and so rather than picking up just a random one, you would first you would see to make sure that it's. And again, he's not necessarily talking about you're going to taste all your wine in your thing and see which one is the very, very best one. Even though obviously you the best way is to buy a wine that you like the best. But he's not even talking about that this one. He's talking about just something that's not vinegary and that's a decent wine, and it's and his version of decent may be very different than our version of decent, but meaning it's not spoiled, and it doesn't smell like vinegar, it doesn't taste like vinegar, and it doesn't smell like dirty socks. So you open the jug first just to make sure that it's that the wine hasn't gone bad and doesn't smell bad.
Right.
Notes.
Just give a whiff. Okay, so yes, he says so even if it had white flecks, but as long as you strain it, if possible, then you can still make kiddush over that wine. Meaning even on Shabbos, you're allowed to strain wine for this purpose as long as you don't use a cloth to like mamish filter it. And we'll see later in Shinyud Tess. Exactly. So now the Alter Rebbe's wording indicates that straining is desired, but not an absolute requirement. He's saying, if possible, im efsherlei.
Right.
So the wine can be used, even if it can't be strained, and they're still floating in there. Okay, fine. So you can still use it. And that is it.
Oh, that's it.
That's it.
I thought there would be a lot for such a long step. Okay, yain love and kachin all of k'meishis bar b'siman tafayim base. White wine, you can make kiddush on it, as is explained in 172, and I'm assuming there will be a note to tell us.
You mean 472?
What?
Tough is 4.
Oh, sorry, my bad. 472. Right,
you do that a few. There's been a couple times you've done that. Like there's something about tough that you keep going 1, but it's okay. It's a tough one. Pun intended.
It's a tough one. All right.
A tough one. Anyway, so there is a note actually on this. I
was wondering why I couldn't find none of those Markel.
So the Markel actually brings up this thing like which regards to in the Talmudic era, it was a minute to use red wine for Pesach to recall the blood that was shed by Parei. Well, Mamish ordered the slaughtering of Jewish children. So at other times, if white wine is of the same quality as the red, it may be used even as a lechatchila preference, as an initial preference, if that's what you like. Well, so that's if it's the same quality. But I think elsewhere we actually go into towards the white wine. I think over there it even goes. The Alter Rebbe goes a step further. If I'm not mistaken, the Alter Rebbe goes a step further, saying, and if you like the white wine better, then you should use that because it's more important when it comes to Shabbos, especially that you have what you enjoy. If you don't like being kiddush on, then you're it's putting the carriage in front of the ox.
The horsey.
Yeah, or the horse.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I wonder if it's actually a very prevalent idea that on Friday night to make kiddush on red, and I think and I wonder if that's somewhat connected with the misconception that's associated with Mazel Madim, with the first hour being Mars, and therefore you don't make kiddush. That some people think
there's something about red and Friday night.
It's only kiddush on red wine, but if you make it on white wine and actually for Mazel Madim as well, it doesn't make any difference if it's white wine or red wine. You don't make kiddush during Mazel Madim, whatever the different reasons.
The Mazel has an association with red because it's Madin and this red and blood and Mars and all that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. Interesting.
But it's actually right.
Okay. So, hey.
You can also make kiddush on the wine that is in the on the Kfar Chabad wine, the wine that's from the bottom of the barrel. Even though it has sediment.
The word for it is called dregs. They call it wine language.
Dregs, but it's sediment is what it is.
Yeah, but it's what's the difference in what you call sediment and dregs? I feel like sediment would be more like if it was like some dregs float. It's like the pieces of the grape that can float. Versus sediment would be like the dirt.
Is grape sediment.
No, what I'm saying is
dregs is specific to grapes, no?
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is that the difference between dregs and sediment is dregs is what falls to the bottom. Sediment can even be sediment falls to the bottom. Dregs might float. But here, what's interesting is when I looked up dregs, the literal thing is the remnants of a liquid left in a container together with any sediment or grounds. Yeah. So,
I mean, anyway, shmarim. Technically, the word shmarim means like remnants.
It's the less desirable. It's the left behind.
It's the remnant. It's what's been left behind.
Yeah. So
it's what's been left behind after the good stuff has been taken out. It's what's left behind. Right. That's shmarim.
So even the bottom of the barrel, even with dregs, meaning so it's totally leftover wine, is preferred over. Continue.
Well, in either case, he says you can make kiddush.
So continue, and that's preferred
al yain shacher and on black wine.
Oh, you're saying and also.
Yeah, and on black wine, and al yain matik, and on sweet wine, which I'm not sure why. Maybe by sweet wine he means like artificially sweetened, like wine that's been sweetened, as opposed to naturally sweet wine. Again, because if you were to go to Russia during his period, your regular wines, even the aged wines that are over 40 days, were not like. These weren't Cabernet Sauvignons. They were like they're sweet.
Well, just but they're naturally fermented in such areas, right?
Yeah. They're naturally fermented sweet. They're not.
Because it's what kind of grape could grow in the area. You
So
got
in
to
this
go
case,
with what you
sweet
can.
wine. I don't think
Works.
he's necessarily talking about like a
There's
white
notes.
Zinfandel.
We'll discuss in a second. Just let's finish this and we'll go back to the notes.
However, the best way of doing the mitzvah is to choose a wine that is the most praiseworthy that is possible to make kiddush on it. The finest wine to dine.
Yeah. So now go back to the thing. So there's a note on black wine. It's if you want to see more details, you can see from Masechtas Nida. Sweet wine. From the word sweet, he brings up, you could see by Rashi and Menachos 86b, whether naturally sweet or sweetened through exposure to the sun. So and the next
by the
note
way,
has,
just note Rashi was a Frenchman.
Yeah, and not just a Frenchman, but a winemaker. He had a vineyard. He literally made wine.
Which is why they have Rashi wines now.
The brand Rashi wine is a pun on that. It's not. I don't think they claim to be from that vineyard or anything, but yeah,
right. Yeah.
But Bava Basra says that all these types of wine should not be used for the wine libations as an initial preference, because again, Kiddush is all modeling after what kind of wine could be used for a carbon. So Bava says none of these should be used lechatchila, but b'diavad, after the fact, they are acceptable. So therefore they could also be used for Kiddush. So yes, sweet wine is not a preferred wine to be used for Kiddush. But like I said, there's this other concept.
Again, what's even by Rashi? It's not 100% clear nowadays what's his gather of sweet.
That's what I'm saying. It says doesn't matter whether it's naturally sweetened or sweetened through exposure to the sun, being left out a little more.
No, but there's a difference between wine between wine which is sweet and wine which is sweetened. In other words,
so you're saying,
in other words,
the grape is a
Chardonnay sweet? Is a Chardonnay worse than a?
But that's what I'm saying. He says it here. He says it whether it's naturally sweet, meaning the grape itself is just a sweeter grape, or it's sweetened. Okay, through exposure to the sun.
Even if it's just from a sweet grape. So he's saying basically that a dry wine is better.
Yes. Which I wanted to actually say this morning. I'm glad I didn't, because I didn't remember this morning exactly like where I had gotten this from. But it is something I do. Like I said, I prefer a drive-in, and usually it's my preference, but I still tend to make Friday night Kiddush on dry wine because there's this Indian. It's a more Kavadika wine. And now this is where it's from. It's mamish because such wines.
I personally like dry wines anyways, but
you're very lucky.
That problem. But
I have to suffer through life, but
No, but then it becomes a question of if you enjoy the white wine more, and you don't really care for dry wine, and it's like some people it's disgusting for them dry wine.
Bottom line, so I'm not breching at the wine. That'd be a difference. I think we got to speak to your mashpia and understand
right, and how dry is dry.
Bottom line, it's still the preference, because a sweet wine.
Right, but I'm saying, but at what point? In other words, is that ad infinitum, that like the drier the wine the better, or is it just that there's a point where this is a dry wine, this is good?
You're saying to measure when does it become a sweet wine to a dry wine?
Because it almost
dry.
Looks,
It doesn't have to be dry. Just when is it not a sweet wine? When is it not
right? Because it doesn't mean dry. Okay, fine. So you should have a dry wine, but it doesn't mean that the drier and drier and drier it is, the better and better and better it is.
Right. Maybe a Jeunesse Cabernet Sauvignon is just fine, and that tends to be naturally, a little more fruity, a little more semi-sweet,
as compared to other wines, some other wines anyway. So anyway, it'd be interesting to know like what gather. I mean, at the end of the day, nowadays your average, like, fine, let's say not a sweet sparkly wine, but your average Chardonnay v'chulu is definitely, I think, within the gather of what will be considered dry for throughout most of Jewish history anyway. You have to have a dry wine, like like a Manischewitz, like a.
I'm not so sure. In some areas that might be true. In some areas it could be the opposite. To them, a Chardonnay, wow, this is so sweet and fruity. They'll be like, maybe. What's up with you?
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what their wines used to be like. So I mean, we do know that the story,
some anthropologist,
Yeah, we do know that the story with Yehudis,
right,
that what did she do? She gave Holofernes wine, right? No, but that was the other way around. Because it was the cheese that dried him out, not the wine. So I'm not sure.
It's the cheese made him thirsty, and then the wine made him sleepy. That's it. She was using the alcohol with that.
Right. It wasn't the wine that made him dry. So anyway.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I don't know what the wine was like. Anywho, weiter.
Love. Keep fun.
Yeah. How do I stop this? I have to press this button. Yeah. That's the end of that note?
Yep, that was it.
Okay, so now we're up to what? Vav?
Yep.
Yeah, Vav. Yayin chai. Live wine, meaning wine that is pure wine, that is pure, that is just wine. That's been not watered down. Afilu imhu chazak kol kach shera'oi lihimozik b'shleisha chalakim mayim v'chelik echad yayin. Even if it is so strong that if you were to water it down 3 parts to 1, hey, there he is.
Hey, sorry. This morning I was in my vehicle, and I didn't want to jump on while I was driving, and I was.
It's okay. No, it's okay. I just I was,
and now I didn't even know I didn't even expect it tonight, and I was on a phone call.
It's fine. I was just telling you the Leib that if I didn't hear from you, I was going to check up on you because
I'm glad
because usually you're very quick through, but that's good. It's fine as long as everything is good, and I see you look great, so perfect.
I look great.
You look fantastic. You look fantastic.
And thank you both rabbis for caring about me. Beautiful.
He's alive.
Right.
To me, you're the measure of beauty. I judge everybody else against how you look.
Oh, please.
So, all right. So we're just starting another seif. Wine that is pure, meaning that it has not been diluted. Even if it is a wine that is so strong that were you to water it down 3 to 1, meaning even if you were to put 3 parts water to this 1 part wine, it would still retain its blessing of agafen.
Oh yeah.
Mekachin olav afilu beloy meziga klo.
Why would you dilute it? What's the reason for it?
Well, because it's so strong. It's so yeah. And this is not as common today where you have like a wine concentrate and you water it down, but apparently there were times when that was the regular. They had a very, very strong wines, and then to serve it they would cut it with some water. And actually you can make kiddush on it so long as it retains its taste of its wine taste, and it doesn't start tasting watery. You can make kiddush on it even. In this case, the question though is, hang on a second, this wine is so strong. What do you do? Can you make kiddush on it as is? It's so powerful.
Why couldn't you?
Well, that's what the Alter Rebbe says. He agrees with you. You can make kiddush on it without any watering down. At the same time, it is better to cut it down. Why? Because obviously, again, it's ideal to make kiddush on the best tasting possible wine, and if it's going to taste better and be more pleasurable when it's cut down, it's better to cut it down. And obviously, as long as you water it down, as is befitting it, and see later 204 in terms of what the appropriate cutting down is for it.
I love his background. I love his background.
And like you said, so this is the Alter Rebbe already saying. I was saying, like in our times, this is not something so common that's done. But so the Alter Rebbe is saying, even in his times, it already wasn't a common thing to do. Our wines, which are not so strong and concentrated, like the wines from the old timey days, it's better to have it without cutting it down. Notes.
So the first note is on the fact that even if it's so strong that it's fit to be diluted 3 parts, you could still make kiddush on it even if you didn't add any water. But they added the note. However, if the wine is so strong that it's difficult to drink without diluting it, you have to dilute it before making kiddush. You can't use that for making kiddush. It's too strong. You can't make kiddush on such wine.
Never had wine that strong.
Thank God. So moving forward, maybe if I have somewhere some more Chaim Reisner wine, I'll share with you.
I did have Chaim Reisner's wine. Yeah, so
some
I
of his
do
stuff,
remember that.
Not all of it. There was plenty of it that was much more decent, much more. There's this little last bottle I have left. I don't know if I have any more elsewhere. There's a bottle I'm working on right now it's not bad in any way. It's very sweet. It almost tastes like how a perfume smells. Like if you made a wine perfume, it's weird. I can't describe it. Anyway, yeah, it's very strongly sweet. But anyway, so definitely still drinkable, even somewhat enjoyable. The wine is mixed with water. So moving forward. So he said it's preferable to dilute it as long as you dilute it in the right way. As we saw earlier in 204. Well, as the Alter Rebbe taught earlier in 204. In this class, we haven't gone through that. But anyway, so over there, it states that when wine is mixed with water, even if there's a majority of water, the blessing Bari Pri Hagafen should still be recited, provided Aleph, the wine remains strong enough that it is still fit to drink, even when so heavily diluted. And Beis, it's common for people to drink it as wine, even when diluted to this extent. They're still calling it this is wine. It's not some other drink, but a mixed drink or some other, whatever. It's considered wine. Now, the maximum dilution he mentions there is 6 parts of water to 1 part wine. So essentially, what is that? That's 15%. Some commercially produced wines have water or other substances added during the manufacturing process. This obviously limits the proportion of water that one may add, that you can do at home. Because if they're adding water then now that changes your math. So many wines, however, are produced without adding water and other substances, and one should seek such wines for Kiddush. So like we mentioned actually a while back, I brought this up, saying that, with grape juices, that's very common. So if you're making a Kiddush on grape juice, you have to know if this is diluted, because most grape juices that are produced are made that way. But I think, as far as I know, is my experience of just seeing different wine manufacturers, most wines, however, are not really made that way. They don't really add water, even just to top off barrels to prevent evaporation and whatnot. Usually they'll add another wine, like some other cheap wine or something. So, but yeah, you got to know how your wine is being made to know if you can add, how much water you can add to dilute it. But like we said, like the Alter Rebbe finished off, thank God our stuff is not so strong. So yeah, and that's it.
I knew this girl. You know what her favorite wine was?
What
was it?
I want to go to Miami.
Oh, I knew something like that was coming. I knew it. I was like, what's the pun? Somehow it has to do with her whining about something.
Right. Okay.
That was good.
Okay, we are now up to Zayin. Yayin Tzimukim. That's wine of raisins. The Hainush, the Keishim Anovim, Yeveshim, and Eistim Alayim Mayim. That they crush the dry grapes, meaning the raisins, and they put water on them, right? They rehydrate them essentially. I think a Riesling a Riesling is made with half rot. It's different. A Riesling is made with grapes that have half rotted into raisins, but aren't quite raisins yet. But whatever, same as something like that.
So a grape turned into a raisin when it's dried out.
Yeah, but the Riesling is made out of half when it's not quite. It's started to turn all raisiny, but whatever it is, but it hasn't quite gotten there. But in this case, you have raisins. They put them in water. Meaning they smush them and put it with water, and they let it sit for 3 days. And it ferments and it becomes wine. Mikachin olav, you are able to make kiddush on it. Whether they like raisined up, they shriveled it up, and while they are on the thingy, right, I'm trying to use the farming terms now. When they're on the vine. Or if they were sun dried. like they oy al yedei teledis ha'ur, or through like a furnace, like meaning like a kiln or something like that, like they were like kiln dried or something, meaning it's like a big vessel or something that they make
How,
it hot and it sits in like
well,
a heat,
how
and that
about
causes it to raise to dry.
how about if they use a still? What's that do to it when they use a
still
still?
is no, a still is different already. A still is now you're distilling it. You're now pulling the alcohol out of the thing. This is basically what you've done is you have raisins of whatever sort, however they became raisins. Either they sun dried or they were machine dried or they dried while still on the vines. And then you take these raisins and they crush them and they mix them with water. And then it sits in there and ferments and becomes wine. So this you can make Kiddush on. That this is now this that you can use it. This is only when they still have a little bit of moisture in them, meaning before you've now rehydrated them. So like maybe maybe something like, I don't know exactly what his the line is for that, but like for example, if you ever seen like freeze dried stuff that's mamish like bone dry. So I imagine like if it was like that and you reconstituted, it wouldn't be okay. However, I don't know. I think our regular raisins, they still have a little bit of moisture in them. The regular,
Right.
I don't know. Not
sure.
If you squish it between your hands, maybe there's moisture, but nothing drips out. I feel like that's. But you're right. I don't know exactly what the line is. It's a good question.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. That's why. So what's the line? What does it mean that it comes out of it when you squeeze it? I don't know. Anyway,
if you squeeze, it comes out, and there's nothing that will squeeze in our modern day raisin.
Fine. Yeah, I'm not sure yet. Maybe I'll never be sure. But the that it is this moisture, right? It goes into the water when they're letting it sit there, and it turns it into wine. So that's what I guess causes the fermentation process. But if no moisture comes out, even if you whack on them or you shmush them with a beam.
Smush them with a what?
With a beam, a wooden beam.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Right. The only way that anything comes out is through this letting them sit in water. So you know what? It would seem that our raisins is fine, because if you take a bunch of if you take our raisins, so he is drawing the line here. He's saying if you were to trample them or crush them with a beam, and no water would come out, no moisture would come out, then it's no good. That's the guideline.
That's it. That's the line.
I'll have to try that with a raisin sometime and see what happens.
Go step on some raisins.
I don't like raisins though, so I'm not gonna.
You don't like raisins?
No.
I don't think.
Here's
Mendel, I think after you step on them, I don't think anyone else is going to either.
No, I don't like them at all before.
You like prunes?
No.
Oh.
And not dried dates and not dry, but especially raisins. This is you see, only on this podcast you get like, what do you call it, the inside fun facts, is that if there is a raisin on my plate, I will no longer eat anything on the entire plate.
Really?
Yeah.
You know what? You're mental.
I know, right?
Now, I was gonna bring some chocolate chip almond raisin cookies for a ride back from Grand Heights, but forget it.
Yeah, remember Raisinets, the chocolate covered raisins in a box?
Oh, yeah.
Remember that? No.
So yeah,
no, I try not to.
I prefer the chocolate covered almonds, but anyway. So then fine. So now notes. So raisin wine. Right off the back, so it's all the way back in Baba Basso. That's where the Alta was, getting all this from. So now, so we said, it steeps in water 3 days until it ferments and becomes wine. But Tzemach Tzedek, in his response in Ira Hakohen, his letter response number 28, writes that he heard it stated in the name of the Alter Rebbe that one should have 3 measures of raisins for every 2 measures of water. That should be the measurement. So it's mostly raisin, meaning more than half raisin, right? 3-2 ratio. Shish, Shar Hashamua. Yeah, not the killer whale, different, safer. He, however, states that he never heard of such a ratio stated by the Alter Rebbe directly, and it appears to him that it is sufficient for the volume of the raisins to be 1/6 that of the water. So similar, like we talked about before, 15% with regards to the wine. It could be that same measurement. He said he heard it, but he never heard it himself. He heard it in the name of, broken telephone. So he feels that it would be enough that it would be 1/6. It's necessary to emphasize that one must soak the raisins with the intention of drinking the beverage produced and not of eating the raisins. So it can't just be, I was soaking my raisins because I like moist raisins, and so the liquid that's left over. No. You're betafka trying to get this liquid to bleed out. Okay. So now the whole license applies, meaning provided some moisture, and they added a note, meaning even a concentrated syrup. So it doesn't have to be a drippy liquid. It could be an oozing syrup, but some moisture squeezed out from them before they're steeped in water. But like I said, when you squeeze them out of their raisins, not even a syrup comes out. It's just so dry. Other things like dates, maybe is, I don't know. I guess try. You take, but I don't think so. I think it's more.
I'm not
mealy.
I'm not getting anywhere near a raisin. You try it.
Okay, fine. So anyway, and then provided some moisture can be squeezed from them before they're steeped in water, and then this wine made from many types of commercially sold raisins would not be acceptable. So the people who added this note, who put together the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch in English, are saying modern day raisins commercially made are not like that. So it wouldn't work. They're saying right off the bat it wouldn't work.
No, what are they saying? No, it wouldn't.
They're saying, commercially made raisins sold today would not be acceptable. They don't.
So I guess in those times they had raisins that were different degrees of raisiny.
Well, I think it's just. I think even today's day and age, if I took a grape and went and dried it out in the sun versus how they do it commercially, and maybe I don't know. Right. It just could be. Maybe if I did it, it would still be, or it also could be the type of grapes they use. You
like raisins?
Nope.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my!
So dried fruit in general you don't like, or is there any dried
figs? I don't
apricots?
Now I love fresh figs. I will not touch a dried fig.
Dried apricots?
Figs. I have to try it.
Dates?
I like.
Oh yes. That's like a dried date is basically a palmetto bug.
But you say you like figs though. You eat figs.
Not dried ones, fresh ones, which you can only get like 1 week a year in Pittsburgh, but.
Right.
My
it's not like they're that yummy that it's worth going to get them more than like.
Well, I mean, when they're around, I get a lot of them.
Right.
Because they remind me of my grandmother's house, but she had two fig trees with giant. That's the only thing is they're so tiny compared to her ones. Well, maybe I was smaller too, so I don't know. But certainly they were they weren't, you go and they'll be like, oh, Turkish figs, and you're like this, no, her figs were like.
Right. All right. Number 8.
Okay.
Ches.
Number Ches. Shimrei Hayayin. The leftovers of the wine. Oy Chaitzanim, or seeds. Shenosan aleim mayim, that he put on them water, v'nasa yayin, and made wine out of them. Right. So, like for example, you have that jelly smushy stuff in the bottom, right? You poured off the good stuff, and now there's like there's stuff in the bottom. The dregs is like that smushy yucky stuff in the bottom, and you pour wine over it, and you made it ferments and turns into wine. You can make Kiddush on it. So the truth is, what he's really doing is kind of summarizing some of these above things, whether it's raisins or whatever different things. So long as it hasn't become vinegary, and so long as it doesn't smell like bad socks. If you have the guideline is if the bracha will be hagafen, you can make kiddush on it. If the bracha will not be hagafen, you cannot make kiddush on it. Actually, that applies to the vinegar too, because it could be even the best vinegar. But once it's vinegar, the reason you can't make kiddush on it is because it's not hagafen anymore. So the general rule is, if you can make hagafen on it, you can make kiddush on it. If you cannot make hagafen on it, then you cannot make kiddush on it. The only exception to the rule that we've had in this entire Siman was the case where you have wine that's not vinegary, but it smells like old socks, or not necessarily old socks, but it's smelly. Not like vinegar going sour smell, but it was in a vessel that had something, whatever it is, and it has just a bad smell. That, even though it is hagafen, you do not make kiddush on. No.
Baruch McDoodle, ask him what his favorite meal is.
No, I'm afraid to.
He likes a prune and cheese omelet.
Lovely. Okay,
That's
so
fantastic.
So notes and ches. So he said, right? If it's steeping grape dregs in pits and water, you could say kiddush. You could say bar bergafen. You could say bar bergafen, you could say kiddush on it. So in that sort, in Reish Daled, the Alter Rebbe writes, in general rule regarding drinks produced by steeping wine dregs, grape pits, or grape peels in water, is that if the liquid from the grape component is in proportion to the water is less than the proportion accepted locally for diluted wine, then the blessing shahakol should be recited over it. So it kind of goes local. What do they call wine? Is this considered wine or not? If it's less than what people consider wine, then see you later.
Okay, Tess. This is an interesting one, because this goes in the face of everything we know. Yesh Aimrim she'ein mikachin al yayin mevushal. There are those that say that you should not make kiddush on yayin mevushal, on cooked wine that was boiled. That's a crazy one, right? Because as we know, many times we're careful to. First of all, most kosher wines are mevushal.
You say are or not?
Most are mevushal.
That's what I thought.
Okay.
Well, definitely the
and
larger,
many are careful to only have mevushal, especially if they're going to have people who don't keep Shabbos or things like this. Are invited to the meals and things like. And
I would have to comment. Yeah. I think the larger, like the mass production wineries, those tend to be mostly mevushal.
The fancier,
but
some of
when
the
you get into like the
nicer
wine, it depends which wine section you're in.
Right,
you know what I'm saying?
That. Some of these Italian wines and
if
French
you're in the
wines,
nicer, most of them are not.
But over in all, most wines that you see, are mevushal. Most kosher wines that are out there.
What's it have to do with people that don't keep Shabbos? I lost you there.
Well, because the whole thing of mevushal wine, reason, and not only that, I was going to step further is often people are careful to have mevushal wine, because wine that's not mevushal, right? If somebody who does not, or at least somebody who publicly and openly does not keep Shabbos,
right?
If they are to handle the wine and things like this, it becomes yayin nesach, which you cannot. And certainly, if a non-Jew opens this wine, similar, so it's more stringent than say something like Chol Yisrael, that as long as the process was overseen. But like, for example, there can't even be, like in the wineries, all of the people working there have to be Shomer Shabbos Jews, which is why it's surprising there's any kosher wines.
Well, hold on. Right. So with Western mevushal, not necessarily does everyone have to working there have to be.
Well, but the people
Shabbos Jews.
Who
it depends at what point. At what point the wine? Well, there's seeing and there's touching, and not everyone holds it. It's just seeing. So there are many places that are mevushal wines where basically you have the non-Jewish workers, whatever. They'll be doing the picking and everything, and then they'll drop the grapes into the hopper.
Picking is fine.
And once it drops into the hopper, they're hands off until it gets mevushal, until it gets pasteurized, which many kosher wineries will. The pasteurization process will be the high enough temperature that it'll also be mevushal. But whatever, it just depends on the winery and depends on the hashgacha. But
in either case, there is such a thing. Yeah. So wine that is not mevushal, and at no point has become mevushal, those issues persist throughout the life of the wine, and which is why many people are careful. Just better just get mevushal wine, and that way you do not have a problem with that. So it's interesting that here he's saying some say you should not make kiddush on a wine that's mevushal, and as well as not yain sheyesh b'dvash, wine that has honey to it, and they're the same reason. She'ein mikachin ela al hayayin haroi l'nasech al gabi hamizbeach. You can only make kiddush on wine that is fitting to pour over the mizbeach, and like we know, right? What is it? Whatever it is, that the honey is not fitting to be right, and right, that if they put it says that, what is it, if they put honey into the incense, nobody would be able to stand from its smell. They would chalish from its amazing smell. However, we know that honey is not fitting to be sacrificed to Hashem because it comes out of a bee's tuchas. So therefore, we do not. That's one of the things, and also I guess what yain mevushal was not allowed to be poured onto the mizbeach. V'yesh aimrim sheloi miatu ela yain she'enori l'nasich mipnei grius shabay. And others maintain that no, that's not including yain mevushal, but rather it only means that not to use wine that is unfitting to be poured because it's disgusting. Kegain megula, like it was left unopened, like we said before, right? That was the reason that we don't make kiddush on open wine, on wine that sits around open, even if it's not a problem because of snakes and such. The sherei chayra, again, like we said before, that it has a bad smell. But when it's mevushal, it's not that it's really puzzle from the mizbeach, besides for the fact that it is changed from its natural way of being, how it was created. However, it did not change for in a bad way, right, to disgustingness, but rather it only changed in a positive fashion. Commission is like it's explained into a 4, and therefore, yes, these authorities say, yes, they maintain you can make a kiddush on it. And needless to say, wine that has honey in it, that it's not puzzle to the mizbeach in its own right, but rather only because of the honey. Like it says in all the barleys and all what do you call it? The honeys. You do not make kiddushan. Sorry, not the leavened things that are leavened, and things that are honeyed. You don't make kiddushan v'chein ikar, and so too is the main. And this is the main opinion, meaning the main opinion is the second opinion. What?
I think that's a quote talking about the carbon.
Yeah, that you don't use that. You don't.
The age,
right. Yeah,
you don't use it as not as kiddush, but you don't.
No, as a carbon, right? On mizbeach. No, but that his whole thing is you only make. They're comparing this to the fact. In other words, the original opinion says you can't make
an our kiddush compares.
Right, they say you can't make kiddush on this. Why? Because why mevushal? Because you can't use mevushal for carbon. Why honey? Because kol ster v'chol dvash, all leavened and honey, you make a carbon. So therefore, if it's not fitting for a carbon, you can't use it for kiddush. The second opinion says that the wine, it's not that really it's possible, it's just that it's changed, but since it changed in a positive way, and therefore you don't use it for the mizbeach, but still because it changed for positive, it's fine. And honey, it's not even that the wine itself does anything wrong, it's just you've added honey, which honey you don't use for a carbon. Like it says that all Sa'ir and Dvash you don't use for a korban. V'chein ikor, and this second opinion that you can use these things is the main opinion. Meaning it is the primary opinion. And not only is it like it's okay to make kiddush on them if that's what you have, but the minhag is to specifically make kiddush on it even if you have other wine, but that these wines are better than the other wines, then you would make it on the yain mevushal if the yain mevushal is better. Which I guess if you need it because you're going to have problems on your table with having non-mevushal, I guess that would constitute better as well. And if you have honey that has wine in it and it's better than any other wine, then you make kiddush on it.
Yeah.
Notes.
I'm here.
I know we're doing a moment of silence now though.
Okay.
Sorry,
That's a new thing. We do a moment of silence to think about the up, and now it's a moment of not silence. Hello.
Okay. Someone joined us because her tooth just fell out. Her fourth tooth. Okay, so let's quickly go through.
You or here?
Listen to.
Who is that? Your daughter?
I can't hear you because you're in my ear. But yeah. Anyway, so the first note is going back to Bichlal. We don't use mevushal wine or honey wine that honey was added. Because, like it says in Baba Basra, both wine that was boiled and wine that honey was added may not be used libations of the altar, as the Alter Rebbe then goes on to say. Once again, the Alter Rebbe then brings up again. Nevertheless, it has been changed positively, not adversely, like it says in section 204, which in general talks about the different dilutions and how wine is changed and what's acceptable or not. So in that source, the Alter Rebbe writes that the flavor and fragrance of boiled wine are superior to that of unboiled wine, which is very interesting. Usually they say, "Oh, non-mevushal wine is better." The Alter Rebbe is saying, "No, actually, mevushal wine is better than non-mevushal wine. Therefore, its bracha does not change, and the bracha ber piragafen is recited over it." Very interesting psak. Which, by the way, there's a very fancy winery in Napa, California.
It's not even a question of pistol for the mizbeach. That's a fundamental question of what you say hagafen on it.
It's an enin. Yeah, well, bracha if it's not wine, like we said, vinegar. Vinegar is not hagafen anymore, even though you didn't add it. It's not diluted. It's the same product, but it changes. Not very hagafen anymore. So I will say one thing. Based on
again, if you walk into your average wine store today, so clearly Rei Rabban and Ba'ilam agree with this sentiment that it is in fact very hagafen.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We have there's a winery called Hagafen Winery. This is literally the name of the winery in Napa, California. And all of their wines are mevushal, and they have some very high class, very fancy wines. They're nicer winery. Anyway, so
but you also have Mahadrin. Did you see in Costco? They had grapefruits, and they're in a box, and the name of the company is Mahadrin. And there's no hechsher on it for, and this was by Shemitah, right after Shemitah.
Interesting.
And there was no hechsher on them, and there actually were warnings not to take it. It's not not a hechsher for what do you call? But the brand name is Mahadrin.
Well, Mahadrin is just an adjective. It just means it's very good.
So but I'm saying this.
We just tend to use it about kosher, but it's not like someone having a brand name kosher. But whatever. I hear what you're saying. Anyway, so needless to say, this also applies to which honey was added, right? Because it's not inherently disqualified. So as the Alter Rebbe writes again in Reish Daled in 204:8, similarly, when honey or peppers are mixed into wine, the blessing by Piragafen is still recited over it. Although its flavor has changed, it is not deteriorated. So a change of flavor is not a problem. It's just making it worse is the issue. So it's not disqualified only because of the honey, right? Okay, and that's it. Wait, sorry, one more. Last note at the end. So we finished off. The halacha follows it. You can say kiddush over such wine, even if you have other wine, but it's not the same quality. This is a nicer wine. Now, both of these points mentioned by the Alter Rebbe are relevant today because many commercially produced wines are pasteurized, which Rav Moshe Feinstein, Tigris Moshe Year there, volume 2, response from 52, and many others consider as boiled. They consider that to be muvushal, and many have sugar and other sweeteners added. There are things added. So the factor of boiled wine is particularly relevant, like what Mendel brought up before. When people are joining for the Shabbos meal, presently do not observe the Shabbos. When such people handle the wine, there are authorities who rule that it should be disqualified. And we'll see that later in section 385, subsection 3. Also see it before in section 55, subsection 14, and the notes in volume 1 of these Shulchan Aruch Harav in section 128, subsection 52, and notes in volume 2 of this edition. Nevertheless, once wine is boiled, this stringency does not apply about people handling it and you having to pour it out.
Right. So now we come to Yud. Medina Yishreveinam Sheikhar, a country or like a state or a city, an area. Shreveinam Sheikhar, that most of their wine is actually not wine at all, but it is rather beer or other beverages. That meaning that it is the way of most of the people in this city or area to establish their meals on beer. Right, just like the regular beverage of meals is wine in the places where there is plenty of wine. So harimashkin elu beir zeikim mayayin. So being that in this city, beer or whatever other beverage is the regular beverage that accompanies their meals. So therefore, in this city, it has the same consideration as wine. V'nikraim sham chamar medina le'inyan kol advarim hatunim kais, and they are called chamar medina, the wine of the region, for anything that requires a cup. V'chel she'ein yayin harbe gadol sviv se'ir kemalach yayin. And any place that there aren't that the wine does not grow, meaning that the grapes do not grow, wine grapes do not grow around the city within a day's traveling. Even if in the store there is a lot of wine available. So the mistami, you could say, meaning the regular going thing is probably not that most of the people of this place, but even though this guy who has the wine store has a lot of wine, but since wine is not a thing local to the area, so probably it's most of the people do not buy wine on a regular basis from this store. But rather, for the most part, the main beverage accompanying their meals is other beverages. And they are chamar medina, right? The wine of the region. And even places that do regularly have wine, meaning that it grows in that area and they make wine in that area. However, one year the grapevines were smitten, meaning there was a frost or something that killed them, something like this, and they're not found so much. And most of the people of the city are having their meals, the regular accompaniments for their meals are in this year on other beverages. So then in that time period, this would apply, and these whatever the regular beverages that accompany the meal would be considered chamar medina. V'yesh chilkin al kol zeh, and there are those that argue on all of this, meaning on this whole idea of Chamar Medina, of that you're allowed to make kiddush on not wine, but rather on Chamar Medina in such places. V'aimrim, and they say she'ein nikra Chamar Medina. Oh no, he's gonna specify it more. And that it's not called Chamar Medina. Elo im kein reiv hashana ein hayayin matzi klol b'chol ha'ir afilu eitz lachenveni. That none of these above things are called Chamar Medina. That they're not called wine of the Medina, unless most of the year you cannot find wine in the entire city, even by the wine store. However, even if wine doesn't grow at all in this region whatsoever, and in this whole country, there's not a single grapevine that's to be found growing. However, in this store, most of the year you can find wine. Even if it's expensive, which would make sense if no grapes grow locally and they have to import all their wine from somewhere else. Nowadays we have imported wines that are relatively cheap, but back then importing was a much more expensive thing. Ein shum maske nikra Chamar Medina le'inyan kol advarim atunim case. So then, in that case, where you can find it by the store most of the year, even if it's expensive, then no other beverage is called wine of the region, and does not satisfy any of the items that require a cup. Chutz mi birchas hamazin, besides for benching, mi tamshin is bud b'simin kuf pe base, from the reason that is explained in 182. Even if right this second there is zero wine in the city to be found, but most of the year there is, even if it's expensive most of the year, then you make on wine. And actually, I remember we used to do this in Ukraine, and it was not easy to get kosher wine in Ukraine. There was this one import store that got stuff from all over Europe and things like that. And they happened to bring a few things from Israel. They had like those Hod Golan little place. Hod Golan, it's an Israeli company that makes all these little turkey sausage little things and whatever.
Oh, okay.
And one of the things they brought, and they have brought some awesome things and some different things. We did not really eat the Hod Golan because first of all, it wasn't, I don't know, maybe it is now. It wasn't then Chabad Shchita, and we were makbid on that, and plus we were sheikhtim, so we would just do our own chickens, and for the most part to make our own meat. So we had plenty of meat, so we didn't we weren't like in a shas adchak that like you wouldn't have meat otherwise for Shabbos and Yom Tov, and we would get some of those awesome things. They were very yummy. I mean, they actually weren't, but when you're in Ukraine and you're missing Israel that you just left,
comparatively yummy.
Yeah, they're very yummy. And they had wine, and the wine was about $30 or $40 a bottle. It was for just regular. I mean, it was a normal, nice, dry Israeli wine. Nothing. It was the kind of thing that you could probably buy here for $10, $11. And there it was anywhere 30, 40, depending on which one they had, $50. And if you remember, to a couple of bachrim in Ukraine, $50 was $50. I mean, I don't know, Ukrainians, bichlal, I can't imagine we could buy this much. But even for us, like $50. So what would you do? We would buy the wine and we would reserve it only for the times that you mamish that. Like, so Friday night we would make it. We would make kiddush on this wine, and we would have exactly two reviasin, and we had it all calculated down to a science to be stretching our wine as long the longest they could. However, there was wine available. It was expensive. Maybe there was sometimes they were out of it, but it was available some of the year. Most of the year it was available.
Right.
Anywho, so there's such a case. Yeah. Ominig ha'ilam. By the way, it's interesting in this one. He doesn't mention Avdallah. He mentions benching.
Yeah, because Avdallah you can use other things.
But he's saying that other way around. He's saying that there's some that say that you cannot use but you cannot use Chamar Medina besides for benching, not for anything else that requires a cup. Unless maybe he's saying it to the exclusion of, maybe he's going with the assumption that we're.
That's
anyway,
how I understood it.
I think I think he'll continue the next day for that. But in either case, it's funny because I know by us, if we have a mezumin, we generally try to make with a case and dafka on wine, whereas Havdalah not I mean we also make on wine. The truth is,
we'll see that like you said, it's the next halach.
Yeah. Anyway, the minhag of the world is like the first opinion that any place that wine doesn't actually grow there within a day's journey. Now, what does a day's journey mean? Nowadays, you can go around the whole world in a day, but so I don't know if it means walking a day or whatever. But in a place where you can where there's no wine growing in a regular within a day's journey. And doesn't mean grapes. I guess it would mean like that there's vineyards there, that it's there's wine vineyards. Although, by the way, Pennsylvania does have wine vineyards. But
there's plenty. Erie, that's one of the big tourist things up there.
And now recently they started making kosher Pennsylvania wines too. I've never had any of them. I've seen them in Murray Kosher.
First of all, I know in Philly. In Philly, there's two different Jewish-owned wineries. That one of them is under more of a proper hechsher, one of them is not quite a great hechsher, but there's two Jewish.
I'm not sure what these ones. I just happened to notice that there were Pennsylvania wines, but then when I looked at them, even though I like to support the local economy when the prices are the same, the prices were not the same, and I was able to get a good wine from Israel for less than I could get the Pennsylvania wine, which I hadn't as of yet heard any reports of it being any good. So I didn't bother. So I didn't even bother looking at the hechsher or anything. But I assume it had some kind of hechsher on it if it was there. But
not worth your risk, huh?
Right, but anyways, the minhag is like the first svara that if wine is not a local thing that's grown and harvested, etc., and most of the people there use something else, generally speaking, with their meals, then even if wine is available in the stores, you can still make kiddush on this Chamar Medina, on whatever this beverages that is commonly used by the locals to have with their meals. Notes.
Okay, so now back to the beginning, we said how the majority of people in that town make beer or other beverages as the primary beverage of their meals. So they make beers or other beverages, as we said, as the Alter Rebbe said previously in 182 subsection 3 and in section 472, subsection 29, the intent is a beverage which, like beer, is considered as dignified. Beverages like kvass, which is basically a lightly fermented grain cooler, or borscht, which is beet juice, ginger water, licorice, they're not included in the licorice, meaning like how we have root beer today, sarsaparilla, all that stuff, are not included in the category of the wine of the region, even if people in a given region view them as their primary beverage. So right here, we're saying basically, soda, not going to be, count.
No, because by the way, you should know, it's funny.
It's got to be classy.
Because things like kvass, which most people, they sort of heard of it and sort of know about it, we generally have every Shabbos.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we're my wife's from Ukraine, so like it's when I was in Ukraine for 2 years. Kvass is like a regular thing here. So most people, it's like kvass is like this foreign thing. No, we actually
heard once.
And it's basically right. It's used as like it's like a Ukrainian soft drink is what it is. It's like the equivalent of soda here.
Gotcha. So anyway, so on this basis, there's a machlokes, different opinion if tea or coffee can then be placed in this category. It's known that on Motzei Shabbos, before they passed away, both the Alter Rebbe and the Rebbe Rashab made Havdalah over coffee. See also Yemei Bereshis, page 355, which quotes the Rebbe as giving a person a directive to say Havdalah over tea or beer when wine was not available. So seemingly by us, we have that, but there definitely is a machlokes on that. Then furthermore, so we said making it the primary beverage of their meal. So the term here is used.
Wait, but this was specifically for Havdalah.
It's Havdalah. Yeah, but still Havdalah has to be Chamar Medina. So we're talking about what's a Chamar Medina.
Right.
I don't think there's two. I don't think there's two versions of Chamar Medina. I don't think there's one Chamar Medina that's for Kiddush and one for Havdalah. I think it's Chamar Medina is Chamar Medina.
Yeah. It's just a question of what of these days do we
Can I use Chamar Medina or not?
Right. So I'm
And
saying
is it a Chamar Medina?
The fact that let's say the Alter Rebbe used coffee for Havdalah, right? So that would point to coffee being Chamar Medina. But
right.
But it would only point to being able to use Chamar Medina during Havdalah as necessarily. It wouldn't necessarily point to being able to make Kiddush on.
It's not a proof that Chamar Medina is something you can use for Kiddush, but it is a proof that coffee is considered Chamar Medina.
Right, correct.
And whenever Chamar Medina is able to use for Kiddush, okay, then coffee can be one of those things. Yeah.
Correct.
So anyway, so to the wording uses the Kvayasu, they say hem al hashechar. The people sit down to a meal and beer is served the primary beverage for that meal. Elsewhere, in section 639.12, so Taf Reish Lamed says, we find the term kavaya al hayayin that they're setting up. So one is that they're establishing for their meal. The other, this one is they're establishing on the wine. So this refers to a situation where people sit down to drink wine in a significant setting, meaning the primary purpose of their gathering is to drink wine together, not to have a meal. So, there's a little bit of a difference there. Exactly what are we talking? Are we talking the main beverage that accompanies the meal, or is this a beverage that you would sit and drink on its own? Which again, that leads towards the
even in terms of establishing the meal, you would perhaps drink kvass as the main beverage, but then again, sometimes you'll drink seltzer as the main beverage along with your meal. But you also
drink. That's what I'm saying.
But you also just drink these things casually in the street, whereas usually wine you're not going to be drinking casually in the street.
Is it
beer you're not going to be drinking?
Depends.
Well, some people will, but
legally maybe, but in Vegas and in New Orleans where it's legal,
But, anyway, but it's usually it's a beverage on its own. You're drinking wine.
Is it a beverage on its own? Are there kvass pubs? Or no? It's another drink.
You for sure drink it on its own. Because, as a matter of fact, that's the whole difference between. I mean, like seltzer, you don't drink seltzer on its own. You only drink it with a meal.
No, but we're talking not stam when I'm thirsty. We're saying, is this like an occasion that you'd go and
something that's festive
and drink
a
seltzer?
Let's get together. Like you wouldn't tell somebody, let's get together for a kvass.
No, it's not happening.
Right.
Okay, you want to have a snack? Would you like a drink? Fine, but that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We're saying, but you would go to a coffee shop. You would,
you would get together for a beer. You would get together for a wine. You would get together for a coffee. Yeah.
And that's why I tried bringing the soda shop. There was a thing, there's a soda fountain back in the 50s, or today's day and age, a Slurpee. Let's go get a Slurpee from 7-Eleven. Yeah. It's its own drink. It's its own occasion. So, but it's not a classy one, but it is its own occasion. So it's
Right.
But anyway.
And you're not supposed to get brain freeze during Havdalah. So, well, by the way, a Slurpee might be something else, but you have to let it melt. Is it a liquid? It's maybe that's the problem with a Slurpee. And once it's so technically a Slurpee maybe is Chamar Medina. But you'd have to wait till it melts. And once it melts, it's not a Slurpee anymore.
It's too late. Yeah. Now it's just the syrup. Anyway, so it can be assumed that where we said that most people do not buy wine regularly from the store, but they make other beverages their mainstay meals, right? So when we went into Medina, basically whenever locally grapevines aren't around and within a day's journey, right? So we said that people are not going to buy wine regularly from the store. Now, in 182 subsection 2, the Alter Rebbe gives the rationale for this ruling. Since wine must be brought to the town from a distant place, it's going to be expensive. They got to pay for the shipping, the truck drivers, etc. As such, certainly the majority of the populace will not make it the regular mainstay of their meals back then. At present, when advances in transportation have made geographic distance less significant, it's questionable to what extent this principle still applies. Indeed, in practically all major Jewish communities, wine is available at reasonable prices, and the concept of Chamar Medina, the wine of the region, does not apply, particularly with regard to Kiddush. See the following sif. We're going to get into that. Nevertheless, if wine is hardly ever brought to an entire region, it's reasonable to assume that other beverages are considered to be the wine of a region and may be used. So if you're in a specific place. Now, I'll point out, and I was going to bring this up, but basically, in most of America, you can go to Trader Joe's or even sometimes to Costco and get wine for very cheap. Trader Joe's always carries a white and a red that's kosher, and you get it for like $6 a bottle, $7 a bottle. Now, you have a state like Pennsylvania that doesn't allow Trader Joe's to drink wine. It's going to be a little more expensive and a little harder to find, but it's still not that expensive. And you
have kosher stores, or even if you don't, you can find it in wine. Even spirit carries it. Yeah.
Still, most supermarkets are still going to have Manischewitz on the shelf. It's just the fact they still are.
Right. They're going to have at least grape juice, which is also fine.
Manischewitz or Kedem grape juice. Right. Yeah.
Right. That's the thing. When we're saying wine here, We're talking about even though having a fermented alcoholic wine is preferable. However, if grape juice is available, then it's available. That means wine is available.
And definitely more preferable than a Chamar Medina.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So fine. So they're not gonna, but they're gonna make other it's the mainstay of their meals. And the kunshas achron. So that's where the aleph is over here. The Alter Rebbe focuses on the more lenient ruling stated in the main text that when grapevines do not grow abundantly in a town, even when wine is available in stores, one may recite kiddush over Chamar Medina. He notes that the Magen Avram accepts that approach in regard to the cup over which benching is recited. The Alter Rebbe notes that the Tur in Aruch 272 also follows this approach with regards to Kiddush. The Alter Rebbe supports the Tur's position by citing the words of the Rambam in Hilchos Shabbos 29:17, who places emphasis on the beverage used by the majority of the populace. Hence, if the lenient view, which the Rambam himself does not accept, is interpreted in that context, the intent would be, even if wine is easily available in stores, since it is not the beverage used by the majority of the people of the locale on a regular basis, other important beverages can be considered as a Chamar Medina, the wine of the region. The Alter Rebbe concludes the note by saying that this explanation justifies the prevailing custom. He does not, however, accept it theoretically as binding halacha. He's just saying that's enough to prove that other opinion.
Right. What's interesting is that what I just thought of something, being that we were talking about the kvass before, is if I recall right, and we when you wanted to get vegetables and this and that, you didn't go to the supermarket, you went to the bazaar, right? You went to the market and people sold. I don't remember seeing grapes very often in the bazaar.
It wasn't a local fruit.
So, I just don't recall seeing it around there. At least not most of the year. Maybe for a few weeks when it was season something, right? Because over there everything goes by season. Here in Giant Eagle, you can walk in at any time and pick up grapes, which, as we established, you can squeeze into a cup for kiddush. So technically, in a supermarket that has grapes, even if they're not locally grown, but they're locally available in plenty,
right.
And you can squeeze them into a cup, it would seem that
right.
that the Chamar Medina would be no, because you have grapes available in plenty.
Yeah. It's a good point.
And that's hagafen. Squeeze it into a cup. You have grapes.
You go make your own hagafen. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
squish them. Yeah. There you go. Perfect.
So anyway,
but I wonder, by the way, did the bazaar have raisins?
Probably.
You might not like them, but you could.
No. They did, but that's because they were.
First of all, their raisins
probably were just like our raisins.
Probably. Too dry.
And second of all, you're not allowed to buy from them because the only reason they had them was because they were anti-Semites and they were trying to irk me with their raisins. What do you think they had raisins? They saw you coming. They knew I hate raisins, and they
Mendel Markel.
Ivrei, you want the raisins? Come take some of Ivan's.
He doesn't like raisins. I'm sure that was it. They're all out to get you, Mendel.
Yeah.
So at the end of the halacha, we said that the cup of wine used for benching is an exception to this rule, as he explained back in 182, subsection 2. So the note says in that source, the Alter Rebbe explains that all authorities agree Kiddush was ordained to be recited over wine. In contrast, benching over a cup of wine is not a fundamental requirement of the mitzvah. It's not a fundamental requirement over benching. You can bench without wine at all.
Right.
So yeah, there is that difference. And speaking of that difference, let's get into your aleph further.
Whereas wine is not only is it ordained, but even ad kidei kach that the wine of Kiddush by the night is an ordained, but that's connected to a Madaraisa, like you said before. That's connected to a Torah thing. So it's even more than just a regular ordained thing.
Which is also why if there's something wrong with the wine and the person makes a Kiddush on that, they don't just say hagafen over. They have to make Kiddush over.
Right. Yeah.
Kiddush has to be over wine.
Right. Your Kiddush was no good. Yeah.
Your Kiddush is not valid. Right. Benching, if you did it over, whatever, he can't do it again because his benching was still benching. It doesn't matter that, oops, this was so.
No, I didn't do it on wine.
It doesn't matter.
Right. Right. Your benching was independently good on it. Yeah.
Yeah. I actually had that. This is going to get a little graphic. So for those who get queasy, they should plug their ears. But I was at Bayim Mashiach Suda, and somebody brecht in my cup without me noticing. It was at the Lubavitch Center. It was me and the Itkins.
Was it enough to take away the Be'er Pri Hagafen? It doesn't make a difference. You still can't make kiddush on it because it smells bad. Aha. See, there's the example.
It smells bad. Definitely bad. Definitely how it was being stored in my cup was being smelled bad. Yeah, you couldn't make a bracha on it, nothing. It was like my third or fourth. It was later. It was hours after Pesach had ended. The rest of the Lubavitch Center had been cleaned up already. So it was one table left of me, Rabbi Itkin, and some of his son-in-laws. And we're bringing away. And yeah, somebody brings to my cup without me noticing. And I went to drink it. And yeah. So, but for example, if I had gone to make kiddush on that or whatever, it doesn't count.
Your kiddush well, right. Well, it depends.
But if I benched on that,
no,
if we benched on that, for example,
would it lose its hagafen if there's a little tiny bit of brech in it? No, it smells bad, so it's.
Oh no, it was enough that I think it would have lost its hagafen.
It was enough that it already watered down the wine to the point where
it was watered down. It was smelled bad. It was tasted terrible. It lost its hagafen. It lost its bracha. So I'm saying, but exactly. If I decided to stop for bringing before taking a sip, instead of a l'chaim, it was what I benched on. We benched on that case.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine. Benching. Fine. Had you made kiddush on it.
But benching was benching.
Yeah.
Benching was benching. Doesn't matter that this cup was full of brech,
Right.
Anyway,
right.
Speaking of brech, Yud Aleph. Actually, sorry. Speaking of brech, I have to take a quick break because it's almost shkia and I got to have a quick mincha. Give me a second.
Take a break.
I'm going to take a quick 1 minute commercial break. Wow. 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 Okay. That so yes, Yud Aleph, that Mendel.
Some are of the opinion that the concept of being able to replace wine with Chamar Medina is only for Havdalah and benching. And other things that need a cup. However, not Kiddush. That you only make Kiddush on wine, and not on other drinks that are Chamar Medina. Even if you cannot find any wine at all in the entire country, Ella Yikadish ala pas, but rather you would make just Kiddush on bread. Ma b'mash mevarich hameitzi ala pas. I don't get it.
So meaning, even if you can't find wine,
but he's
take Kiddush over the bread.
He's saying like Kiddush with bread, and in the day he is yaitze with what he makes hameitzi on the bread.
I think it means then also by day also you say hameitzi over bread. Meaning and there's a note on this and the saying the hameitzi saying that hameitzi will constitute Kiddush. That counts as Kiddush. Because you don't make a second bracha of
meaning because of the day you don't have Mekadesh Shabbos.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So the bracha hameitzi that is the Kiddush. So
he's saying at the night you say hameitzi and then you say Baruch Mekadesh Shabbos. In the day, just like you say Baruch Piagofim, you say hameitzi. Fine, that makes sense. And some say that even somebody who has wine. So he's bringing two extremes here. Some say even if you have wine, you can make kiddush on chamar medina according to the halacha. But this is not the beautiful, most beautiful way of doing the mitzvah. You should make kiddush on wine in the first place. But if he does not have wine in his house, even if there is in the store, he doesn't have to make kiddush on it. Unless he wants to do the mitzvah in the best way, then he should go and buy wine. But if he doesn't have it, he doesn't have to go and make himself crazy to get it. The inyan ma'aseh, and now that we've spoken about all these different things, what practically shall one do? Says the Alter Rebbe, in ein yayin ba'ir, if there's no wine in the city, yekadish balayla alapas, lachush lasvar lishtreina. So he should make kiddush on the night kiddush. He should make on bread. So be careful of the first svara, of the first opinion. Ubayayim yekadish alamashke, shehu chamar medina. And during the day, he should make kiddush on a drink which is chamar medina. See, that's where people get this thing from. They ignore the rest of it and just said, "Oh, v'yemi kaddish ala mashke." There you go, done, finished. Te'im lo yivarich el ala pas. Ein eze heker yesh the kiddush there. Why? Because by the night it's recognizable. What does it mean? It's recognizable because I made the hamaitzi and then I made the bracha mekadish Shabbos. So it's clear that this is kiddush. In the day, however, you just make a hamaitzi like you always would make a hamaitzi. So it's not recognizable that you made a kiddush. So therefore, he should make on chamar medina the kiddush and then make bracha on the bread, and that way there's a recognition that he made a kiddush. That's a separate thing from lechem mishnah. Sha'af b'loy mitzvahs kiddush de'hi mevarach al pas. Even without this kiddush, he would have made the bracha on the bread during the day. Aval im yesh yayin ba'ir, but if there is wine in the city, ein lekadish ala pas ela ala yayin. Ben balayla ben bayim, but so if there is wine in the city, he should not make kiddush on bread, but rather he should make on wine both in the night and in the day. Why? Because there are those that say that the kiddush one should not make on bread at all, but rather on a cup. Since there is such an opinion, even though obviously it's not a common opinion. But however, being that there is such an opinion, it is better to just make it on wine in any time that there is any way you can get a hold of wine. However, in these times that the wine is expensive, right? Remember, he's talking about Dinas Elu. He's not talking about the United States of A. He's talking about the United Kremlins of Russia, or whatever they are. The United Oblasts.
You mean the USSR?
The United Oblasts of Soviets. Actually, no, he's not even talking about that. It was the Alter Rebbe. There was no Soviets. He was talking about Tsarist Empire of Crimea, and its surroundings. That in Tsarist Russia, wine you could get wine, but it's very expensive. Yesh lo hakil b'kiddush shel yom. So you can be makel and make kiddush during the day on mashke that's chamar medina. That's right. Even if he has wine in his house, that in the day since he's first making on chamar medina and then he's making bread. And it's only midrabanan also, by the way. So he's yaitza according to everybody, really. So it's fine. By night he's not yaitza. First of all, by night it's a more stringent kiddush, and second of all, it's also that he isn't yaitza according to everybody by the night. Because according to some, he's not yaitza but from that. So therefore, in the day when we're in these places, which by the way, that's probably how the minhag of those in Chabad who make kiddush on mashke in the day. It's because their father did it and their Zayda did it, and the reason their Zayda did it is because his father and his Zayda is because they were in Russia, even though they were in Soviet Russia. But in Soviet Russia, it was equally hard to come by wine. It was not kosher wine, especially being that the truth is anything kosher. The Soviet government was not exactly supportive of OK Laboratories and the Orthodox Union. and it was very so. And like I said before, to my recollection, I don't remember grapes being like something that was normally available in Russia. And I imagine the further north you go in Russia, once you get to Belarus and all those places or whatever, probably even less so. So probably getting a hold of wine was no easy feat, and therefore it was a regular thing. That's what people made kiddush on regularly during the day.
Yeah, interesting.
In Russia, Chamar Medina was mashke.
The vast majority of Russia's territory is unsuitable for grape growing, with most of the production concentrated in parts of Krasnodar, Rostov, as well as Crimea.
See?
Just those three areas.
Okay. See, now you know why the Russians wanted Crimea so bad.
Crimea is so bad.
They wanted to see now we understand the whole thing. Now it makes sense.
It's all coming together,
right? Yeah, right. Because Crimea is like called like the Mediterranean of Russia. It's like has a more temperate. Rostov, Lavdavka. I'm not sure why Rostov, but in other words, if you can grow them in Rostov, why not somewhere else? I don't know, but I know that Crimea was a vacation spot. It was by the Black Sea. People would go there because of its beautiful weather and things like this. So, so maybe because of that, they're able. So, anyways, not that I noticed when I was in Crimea, several times. Because when I was in Ukraine, well, back then that was also Ukraine, but my brother was in Simferopol, so we would go. So I would go visit him sometimes for Shabbos. Sometimes he would come visit me. We'd take a train, anyway, I do remember that the weather was beautiful there. I don't remember that I love Dafka. I remember an abundance of grapes everywhere, but neither was I specifically looking for it. So, and usually I was there over a Shabbos. So I probably didn't spend too much time in a bazaar over there anyway. Whereas in Ukraine, I spent time there getting stuff and whatever. And I didn't notice. I don't think I ever noticed grapes there. Yeah. So anyway, that's and then being that people's father and grandfather and great grandfather had that minog seems to have continued, even though the reason for it is pretty much in our country would seem to be no. I guess everybody can ask their own rav and mashpia what the appropriate things to do there. Even though there are those that say that they did not, the sages did not set. They did not. How do you call it? What do you call it when the sages said like a decree? Probably a better word for that.
Enacted.
Enact. They did not yet enact that there should be kiddush besides for on wine. That's and not on. It should be only on wine, but not on bread and not on chamar medina. Mikol makim ein la hachmir kol koch b'kiddush al yom. You don't need to be that machmir on the kiddush of the day. She'ein chiv kol koch ma'ishalaylo, which is not as much of an obligation like the night. Kevin shayayin b'yegim dinaselu. So here again, he had me so excited for a second. He said, at the same time, you don't have to be so machmir. But he also says, because the wine is so expensive here. Again, so
i.e., if that doesn't apply, you're not off the hook.
No, I mean, ask your Rav, ask your mashpia, and they'll tell you what to do. We call makim mitzvah amur for lekadosh yayin, but nevertheless, the best way to make kiddush is to always do it on the wine.
Right.
Okay, that part he said pretty clear. So
yeah. So let's just go back a little bit to one of the notes, but there was another note, interesting looking note in here. Yeah. So back to Uli Inyan Amaisa. So there's no wine in the city, right? So during the day, you make kiddush on chamar medina because if he says just over hamaitzi, then how's it going to be distinct, right? Even if without them it's for kiddush, he would be saying hamaitzi anyway. So what's hamaitzi is not going to stick out at night when you say the bracha of kiddush, and thus the recitation of kiddush is distinct. You say a separate bracha, right? So during the day, there's no special bracha for kiddush. So nothing distinguishes the Almighty as a kiddush bracha. The preliminary readings are not significant in this context, especially as we know. He said elsewhere, with regards to Friday night, whatever, they can maybe even be made up elsewhere and even after, whatever. So thus, fundamentally, there will be no difference between this practice on Shabbos and that during the week. Saying Almighty, so hence it is proper to make a distinction by saying kiddush over a beverage. It's the wine of the region, and this comes from the Kaf HaChaim. which just by the way, a little plug for the Kavach. I'm so glad the Alter Rebbe basically turned me on to the Kavach because so many interesting things, really fascinating, really like kabbalistically involved and stuff, and there's things about like lighting Shabbos candles. Yeah, some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
Great set to have. Okay, so then 39. So with regards to, nevertheless, in these countries, wine is expensive, so you can be Mako Kiddush by day, and you could say it on Chamar Medina even if you have wine at home. And he brings up, the Rebbe strongly discouraged the practice of regularly reciting Kiddush over alcoholic beverages other than wine. Yash in Hasidic parlance. See Chuvas Agurim B'Shulchan Aruch, page 132. See Teres Menachem, volume 36, pages 352 to 353. So, again, it's, we talked about before, like, yeah, I always, when we say l'chaim, I say l'chaim, but no, I'm making Kiddush on wine. That's not, from what I've learned, I'm not doing this because I'm some stickler and I look down. No, I'll say l'chaim. I'm not saying l'chaim. But it says very clearly,
Oh,
like,
you stickler. You stickler,
okay.
You.
Such a stickler. I just like sticks. 39, and I think that was it. Yeah, the next note, is the next one. Okay, Yud Beis. I have to ask. We didn't start exactly at 7, but yeah, what's our time frame?
Well, I mean, how many notes are left? Because there's not so many sifim left. We can probably hit the end of the.
Okay, so let's just go. Yeah, there's about 10 notes.
Somebody who is not allowed to drink wine because he made a vow not to drink wine, he can still make kiddush on it, and others and somebody else will drink it, like we said before. Even though ideally the person making the kiddush drinks from it. However, another option, and in this case that would be a necessary option, is that as long as somebody else drinks malay lugma, if somebody else drinks the shear in the right time, he's good. What if there's other people aren't with him that will drink it? So he should make kiddush on the bread, not on wine. Why? Because he can't drink the wine because he made a neder, he made a vow.
Right. Yeah.
Well, if there's nobody with him, I don't know how he's going to hear from others that make kiddush on wine, but maybe if it means if there's nobody with him, I don't know who can. I don't know. But in either case,
others. Well, they put in brackets in here, eating with him, meaning it could be around, but maybe they're just not taking part.
Okay, right. Oh, they're not being kivesed with him. So then he can hear from others who are making kiddush, even though I guess he will not be eating with them.
Yeah.
Maybe something else. But somebody who does not drink wine because he hates it, he doesn't like it. Like, let's say wine reminds him of raisins. So So for example, in my case, let's say that there was wine made out of raisins.
Definitely.
Right? That's a perfect example. There's a raisin wine and there's no other wine to make kiddush on.
And it's a better hagaf. At least it's hagafen, right? It's not
right.
a
So then you should push yourself to drink it by kiddush alayla, by kiddush of night, v'lo the shapas, and not make on bread. Mitam shenis bar, like and he should hear from other people who or just same thing, like somebody who made a neder. So better he should either force himself or hear somebody else. That's by kiddush of night. I imagine in the kiddush of the day he can make on Chamar Medina, based on the same thing.
Right. Well, you said it's not that much of a problem. Yeah. So okay. So jumping into the what you call. So if he's making kiddush and other people are dining with him, so meaning it's not acceptable for a person who will not partake of at least an olive-sized piece of cake or bread or a vias of wine, which is 86 cc's or 2.9 fluid ounces, at this sitting to partake of the wine, because kiddush has to be recited. One must partake of the wine in the place of one's Shabbos meal. So it has to be, again, kiddush makam suda. They're just stressing that. Now, get into a nice big note in regards to the kuntus achron. Partake of it, right? So those others should not recite the bracha bar pergafen, even if they know that blessing. In the kuntus achron, that's very interesting. Hold on. Yeah, which is very interesting, especially in contrast to what we learned this morning, and we double checked with Rabbi Leib Weinberg, which is where the Rebbe told told his father, Rabbi Yosef Weinberg, that everyone else in the room should say their own hagafen on their own wine. But I guess it's different because it's not their own wine here. We're talking about where they're drinking. A hagafen was made over this wine on their behalf. So they're not having their own wine. They're literally drinking this wine.
Right.
I think from my understanding,
Well,
that would be the difference.
in this case, this is the guy who's drinking the Malay Lugma.
Exactly. He's drinking the wine luga of the wine that the
wine
was
Kiddush
set
was made on.
as
not
opposed
that,
to
and it's not pagum.
Right, and it's not pagum
because the other guy couldn't drink it.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So scenarios. Yeah.
Exactly that and that. Exactly. So in note number 2, the Alter Rebbe focuses on the ruling in the main text that a person who's forbidden to drink wine because of a vow may make kiddush over wine and have others partake of the wine. The Alter Rebbe states that his ruling follows the Ramah in Ira Hakohen 2:7-9, although here the Magen Avraham takes issue with the Ramah. In other places, the Magen Avraham accepts the Ramah's view. So the Alter Rebbe also discusses the proof Magen Avraham cites to support its contention that one may not fulfill his obligation by having others partake of the wine. The ruling of Ramah in Ira Hakohen 2:73-4, see the Alter Rebbe's discussion on that subject over there, that a person who does not eat with others should not recite Kiddush on their behalf unless they do not know how to recite that bracha. The implication is that here, since these people do know how to say the bracha, no one else should say Kiddush for them. The Alter Rebbe challenges the logic of the support, explaining that in the situation mentioned by the Ramah...
Hold on a second. You said the listener how to say the bracha. You mean bracha Hashem, that or the whole Kiddush?
I think we're talking about even the bracha of Bar Gafel.
So if they just know that, but that doesn't, you just can't make a Kiddush saying that, the last line, can you?
No, but we're talking about who's going to drink said grape juice.
Oh, right. In other words, the same person is going to make the hagafen and he's going to make the Kiddush bracha, both.
Because that's part of it.
That's right. But if you just only know the last line, that shouldn't qualify you to say.
You would have to say the hagafen. So.
Yeah. Right, okay. Sure.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
In this case, the same person, he's making the hagafen, he's making the last bracha. Somebody else is answering amen and being yotzet to both brachas, and then that person is the one drinking the wine, being that the person who made the hagafen had made a vow not to drink wine.
Why?
Why did he make a
For
vow?
Whatever reason.
Maybe he's a Nazir, whatever.
Medical,
or maybe he swore he didn't realize the power of a vow that you have to actually have to keep it. Who knows?
Because he can't make it twice, can he? When you he can't make it at shul and go home make it for the family.
Well, no, it's not about making it twice. It's because he cannot drink wine. This is his first time making kiddush.
Okay,
but it is forbidden to him to drink wine.
Okay,
he's a Nazir. A Nazir is not allowed to drink wine. He took a vow. He took a vow that he's to not drink wine. Therefore, if he drinks wine, he'll be breaking his vow.
Okay.
Well, they give you all kinds of scenarios, man.
It matters.
Well, listen, the players for every scenario. So.
Yeah. The Alter Rebbe, so he changes. He says, "Sorry, you're going to have to start back a little bit, just so we still have the flow of what we're talking about." So the Alter Rebbe challenges the logic of the support, explaining the situation mentioned by the Ramah in 273, that people for whom Kiddush is being recited, they know how to say the bracha by Pri Hagafen. So I said, what they do not know is the bracha for Kiddush. So exactly what you brought up is literally the next words that we're about to read.
Look at that.
So in contrast,
you spoke just barely though. That's the next thing he brings up.
It's good that you spoke. It was you had the right thing in mind. But maybe it's always good to save your questions for the Q&A. Right. No, I'm just kidding. No, the Alter saying it's different over there.
Just try to butt my way in. Okay, go ahead.
At the end of the paragraph, sure. There's a moment. So it's different when they don't know the blessing they don't know the blessing for Bar Gafel, but they don't know the blessing for Kiddush. But over here, the question isn't about that. The question concerns the blessing on the Bar Gafel itself, not the blessings for Kiddush, because this guy is not able to drink the wine because he said the oath. Took the oath. So in such an instance, to borrow the Alter Rebbe's words over in section 190 in subsection 4, the person may recite the blessing over wine with the intent that another person would drink it. He just has it in mind. Quote, since he's obligated to recite the blessing of Kiddush to fulfill his own obligation, he may also recite the blessing over the wine that was ordained to be recited before Kiddush, because they're a part of it. End quote. The Alter Rebbe proceeds to discuss this issue in depth explaining why the ruling from section 273 is not relevant to the issue here. And that was the what the Alter Rebbe continued with the sif in this chapter. Now we kept going and saying, okay, so no one eating with him, he should say the kiddush over bread and not over wine, or he should hear. So Mendel asked the brilliant question of, wait a second, if there's no one with him, who's he going to hear from? So the note says, i.e., he should leave the place where there are no others with him, and he should go somewhere else where he can hear kiddush from someone who says it over wine. And there he should have at least a basic meal, just a little bit of an olive-sized portion of bread or cake or a revius of wine, which I find it funny that they put in or a revius of wine. So, hey, wait a second, you can't have it. Hello?
Right, he's a guy who can't have wine.
I think it was a bit of a, an oversight. But yeah, it's kind of funny. Yeah, so the recitation of Kiddush by others who recite it over wine. So, and seemingly these same laws apply to one who is given a medical directive not to drink wine. So, yeah, in a case, basically, it's not only an oath, a more modern day thing. You don't have people really making oaths to be a Nazir. It does exist, absolutely does. There are people who did it without realizing that we don't do that nowadays, and now they're halachically bound to do it. There's a guy, Ari Lesser, I think his name is. He's known to be a bit of a rapper. He has long hair not because he's a hippie, but because he took on an oath to be a Nazir before he realized he shouldn't. So his Rav said, yeah, you can't break that.
Excuse me, what's a Nazir? I've heard it so many times.
A Nazir, a Nazirite, like Shimshon HaGibar was a Nazir, a Nazirite. It's a special thing where someone would in an effort to basically be holy, they would take on a special oath to take this status, and they were not allowed to cut their hair. They were not allowed to imbibe any sort of grape product or something out of it. So meaning not grapes itself, not balsamic vinaigrette, not vinegar from grapes, whatever, like nothing, no wine, no grape juice.
Or like Mendel, raisins.
Yeah.
They were not allowed, or raisins, correct? Or any raisin wine,
Mendel's
grape juice.
Mendel's a Nazir then, right?
No, he's
I'm
not
only a raisin Nazir.
He just doesn't like raisins. And not allowed to come into touch with the dead. With Samson had a special exclusion. He was a Nazir in all respects except two. One is that he never cut his hair. A regular Nazir eventually cuts their hair after a certain amount of time, and then they bring an offering to the Beis Hamikdash. Samson never cut his hair. At least he didn't. Someone else did, but he didn't. And he also was allowed to come into contact with the dead, especially because he fought and he killed people. But anyway, so that's a whole other discussion. What a Nazir is. When we learn the halachas of Nazir, we'll get into that. That's just it's short to answer your question. But like I said, a more common example of
Go ahead.
A more common example today of that these laws would apply to is someone very simply who has a directive medically they can't have wine. They're not allowed to have wine. So what should they do? Now, I think the simple answer is they should just have grape juice. But yeah.
No, but there's actually some people. If somebody's allergic to grape juice also, or sulfites or something like that.
They could be allergic, right?
So right,
but
it could not be the alcohol. It could be the issue is actually grape products.
But also it could be grape products, or just the fact that there is the concept, like we said before. One, there's the whole thing. There's the opinion that says you shouldn't have sweet wine. Grape juice would be that.
Right.
Really shouldn't. So it's better to hear it from somebody else or even make it over bread than possibly making it over grape juice. But you should ask your Rav for that balance. I'm not 100% sure on that. But anyway, in contrast, so then we continued on and we said that, one who doesn't drink, right, he just doesn't like it, so he should push himself. As we said in just the previous chapter, subsection, excuse me, the previous, Sif 11, greater importance is given to the night Kiddush. So that's why the Alter Rebbe brings up in the night, Kiddush by night, you should push yourself. From the Alter Rebbe's words, it appears that it is enough to recite Kiddush over the wine of the region or over bread for the day meal. So again, answering what Mendel brought up, that's why he doesn't say the meal. It seems to imply that that's fine. Just do it on Chamar Medina or on Challah. But by night, you should really push yourself. Even if you don't like the wine, you should do it. And you should not say Kiddush over bread by night, as we said before, that there are authorities who maintain Kiddush by night was only instituted over wine. It has to be B'tafka wine. So bread is really a backup, but it's B'tafka specifically over wine.
Turn on the light bulb.
Ira, you have any questions?
It should be.
No, I was talking to my device.
It should be noted. It should be noted that how do they say, the only one you're fooling is yourself. Meaning, if you hate the wine only on Shabbos day,
Right.
The
Nice
only
try.
one you're fooling is yourself.
Suddenly you don't like wine.
These are actually serious concepts and whatever it is that should be discussed. I'm not saying one way or the other. They should be discussed with one's Rav, Mashpia, etc. As far as somebody who can drink wine during the day, and if you're making kiddush on mashka, that's something that should be discussed with one's Rav, with one's Mashpia, etc. And whatever the directive is from there, no problemos on my end. Yeah. Any more notes on this one?
Nope, that's it. Yud Gimel.
You do not need to make an after bracha on the cup of kiddush, whether at night, whether in the day, whether it's wine, whether it's chamar medina, because the kiddush is part of the meal. And this cup is secondary to the meal. And it is he fulfills the obligation of the after bracha with the blessing after the meal, that is after this meal, as if he would have drunk this wine or beer or whatever it is, depending on the scenario, during the meal. C 174. Now, if he drank wine before the meal, besides for kiddush, meaning after you made, I'm assuming after you made kiddush and before you made hametzi.
Yeah, I'm guessing.
If it's wine, you do not have to make a bracha achrona. Like for the reason that's in 174, which I assume will be in the notes. But if it is another beverage, then he must make a bracha after it, meaning if he drank wine besides for the kiddush before the meal. Unless he makes a bracha achrona after birchas hamazon. As is explained there.
Yeah. Okay, so let's go through the notes. First, we said kiddush is for the sake of the meal, right? So that's why you don't need to say an after bracha. So in general, wine is considered an element of the meal because it stimulates a person's appetite, as it says in section 174. In particular, this ruling applies with regards to the wine of kiddush because one may not partake of the meal without first reciting said kiddush. And see section 473, subsection 10, where the Alter Rebbe applies this ruling to the wine drunk at the Seder, even though there is a substantial hiatus between the Kiddush and the beginning of the actual meal. Right. We don't say an after bracha in between. We do actually, because of that time, say a new Bari Pri Hagafen, right? But we don't say another after. Yeah. But yeah, okay. So now it says, and it's as if you had drunk it during the meal itself. It's tafel, as it says in 174. Significantly, in that source, the Alter Rebbe writes that kiddush is associated with the meal because kiddush may be recited only in place of a meal. End quote. While here, the emphasis is that kiddush is necessary for the sake of the meal. That's what we're more focusing on. So now, if one drank wine, there's no need to say a bracha after it, as it says in 174. In that source, it writes whenever the Alter Rebbe writes whenever the bracha over wine that one drinks before a meal covers wine that one drinks during a meal, it is not necessary to recite a bracha after the wine at all. The wine before the meal is covered by benching, by grace after meals, just like the wine he drank during the meal. Since they were covered by the same blessing recited before drinking, they are considered a single act of drinking and hence covered by benching. But then we're talking about, if he's going to drink something else, a different kind of drink, so he has to say a different bracha, unless you're going to be saying another bracha achrona after, the guy who benches right over a cup of wine, right? He says another ala gefen or whatever. So, as explained in that source, basically in the Sifim 6 and 7 over there, the Alter Rebbe writes, in contrast, one who drinks other beverages before a meal during the week must recite a blessing after drinking them, even if he intended to drink these beverages during the meal as well. The rationale is the blessing recited before partaking of these beverages before the meal does not cover the beverages he drinks during the meal. The beverages he drinks during the meal do not require blessing at all. So if you're thirsty before you go have lunch and I'll have a quick lemonade or whatever, and you say bracha shahakol, you got to say an after bracha before you then go wash for your hametz. You can't just go, I'm going to bench in a minute anyway, it'll cover it. No, it doesn't, because it didn't cover the 4 blessing you made, so it doesn't cover the after blessing. When does the above apply? When one does not have a cup of wine over which to recite the grace after meals. If, however, he does intend to say grace over a cup of wine, talking even during the week, even as an initial preference, it is not necessary to recite a blessing after partaking of the beverages that one drinks before the meal, because these other beverages will then be covered by the blessing that one will recite after the cup of wine over which he recites grace. Now, what's interesting is one question I'd like to ask, but I don't know if I'd venture a guess the answer to this, but what happens if your meal takes much longer than 72 minutes, the amount that's required? So is the eating of your drinking, even though the benching doesn't cover, it would seem from this, the fact that he doesn't bring it up, it would seem, I would assume, but you know what they say about assuming, it makes a blank out of you and me. But it would seem that the meal that you're eating and drinking, the benching over that doesn't cover the after blessing for the thing, but it does continue the time for which you're allowed to make an after bracha.
Well, maybe
though you drank it before the meal.
Maybe just like the Seder, where you'd have to make another. In theory, you'd have to make another shahakel, but you don't have to make another shahakel because you're in the middle of the meal, and the meal covers that shahakel. So, but otherwise, really, you would have to make another shahakel, but not another berachas hamazon. Just like, but not another. Maybe just like the Seder, where the after bracha connects to it, but not
still covers. Right. Because you're still focused. It's still on the thing. You're still drinking. It's still a meal you're having, or it's still part of the Seder that's still connected. It's not a hefsek, even though it is technically a long enough time that would be considered separation, but there's no separation because you're still continuing the thing you started.
The separation would be when you stopped for said period.
Right.
For example, when you're eating
bread, something else, you weren't part of a meal.
There's a period from when you stopped eating the meal that you can no longer bench. But as long as you're eating, that time doesn't start.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be
if you're eating for 6 hours, the meal is 6 hours long. You don't run into a problem with benching. It's only when you've stopped eating and now you haven't benched for 72 hours. For 72 hours.
Minutes.
72 hours. That's a nice header I'm giving there.
I like that. Sock. Okay. All right.
That header is going to cost. That header, I'll bill you for it. That header is going to cost you $14.93.
And you can send it to the same place we're accepting donations.
Pennsylvania.
Right. And you can send it to the same places we're accepting donations.
Right.
Okay. 14. Your dollar.
You do not need to make meaning a first bracha, a before bracha on the wine that you drink during the meal, because you already will fulfill that bracha by making the Be'er Piagofen that was recited during Kiddush.
And the note says, not only does that apply to the person who makes Kiddush, but also the people who listen to his bracha and partook of the wine. Meaning, even according to the opinions, not like we said, at Lubavitch customs say your own Be'er Piagofen, but no, even people who didn't say Be'er Piagofen, all they did was say Amen and drink Kiddush, they were covered by that Be'er Piagofen, so it's all good in the hood. So as we see in section 174.5, but then another note, and in that source over there, 174, subsection 5, Dalton Rebbe writes, if one drank wine before a meal, even if he did so before sitting down to partake of the meal, it's not necessary for him to recite a blessing over the wine. He will drink during the meal, where it's covered by the blessing recited over the wine before the meal. An exception to this rule, one who specifically intended not to drink wine during the meal, and then he changed his mind, decided to drink it. He's like, man, I'm going to have to drive later, or whatever. I don't want to drink too much wine, so I'm just going to have this wine for Kiddush. But then that's it. And then during the meal, he's like, you know what, that wine looks really good. Let me have some. Yeah, no, he has to make a new one.
Right.
In particular, this applies with regards to Kiddush because it's stated both here and in that source, Kiddush is necessary for the meal, so it connects to the meal. But when you're not making Kiddush, and you just said Hagafen before you washed for Amaitzi, wouldn't count. All right, we'll pick it up tomorrow morning at 9-ish.
Tomorrow morning
with 270,
273.
273. I just want to double check the curriculum.
Yeah, it's 273, and then
then we jump, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we jumped after to like I think
276.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a quick question. I wonder, I guess we don't know the answer. If your father-in-law, Rabbi Weinstein, and Rabbi Yossi Darren, I wonder if they know this, what you guys are discussing all these the past couple of weeks.
I don't know. You got to ask them.
No, I kind of hope not. I don't want to get in trouble.
Well, how would you get in trouble?
I'm kidding. I'm not getting.
Well, then once you guys pass this test, notice I said you guys will pass this test next Sunday.